So it's a really interesting question. The question that came in through the tip was, what, like, basically for surprise debuts, what do you think we get as a surprise debut for NXT tonight on the CW? There's obviously been a lot of rumors, guys. There's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of things that people have been talking about when it comes to NXT on the CW. We know Stephanie Vicker showed up on Satellite last week on NXT. I do think it is very possible that we get Stephanie Vicker going face-to-face with Julia. I do believe Julia will be crowned the new NXT Women's Champion on tonight's episode of NXT on the CW, which would be a great way to kick off the show. We do know that is the match that is scheduled to open the show. So I do expect, Jafar, to answer your question, I think I think we get Stephanie Vicker, and I do think we get Delta. I think we get Delta Brady as well. I think WWE is going to super stack the show with debuts. I see a lot of people in the chat asking about Ricky Starks showing up in NXT. And there's a lot of confusion here with Ricky Starks in NXT. There's a lot of questions about Ricky Starks in NXT. There's a lot of people who are wondering if Ricky Starks will be coming to NXT. And listen, I'm going to tell you guys this. The Ricky Starks situation is really crazy because about 3 weeks ago, there was a report that came out that Ricky Starks was a free agent and that he was out of contract with AEW. Tony Khan has not put him on TV. Tony Khan has not put him on Collision, Dynamite, Rampage. Then there's obviously pictures floating around with, with Ricky Starks and WWE talent, Jade Cargill, Cody Rhodes, some other people from the Nightmare Factory. So a lot of people were wondering, okay, is this a possibility that maybe Ricky Starks comes to WWE? Then there's been rumors that Ricky Starks is trying to go to WWE. Then what becomes even a little bit more interesting here, guys, and this is where I get a little bit confused. Just a week ago or so, there was a report that came out that Ricky Starks was not actually a free agent and he was still under contract with AEW. This is leading people to believe that Ricky Starks has asked for his way out of AEW. I don't have confirmation on that. There's nothing that's been suggested to me that AEW has granted Ricky Starks out of his contract, okay? However, I will say this. If Ricky Starks is out of his contract, and that report is true, that Ricky Starks has been out of his contract for about a month now, and the reason why he hasn't appeared on TV or anything like that is because he's showing up in NXT. I mean, it makes sense for Ricky Starks to be at NXT. And it would make more sense for Ricky Starks to show up and debut on NXT as it goes off the air. Because what's really, really interesting here, the main event is likely going to be Trick Williams versus Ethan Page. And with Ethan Page versus Trick Williams, CM Punk is the special guest referee. I mean, it sounds very likely that the show is going to end with a bang. WWE is notorious on the NXT brand for having things happen after the copyright logo. There would never be a better opportunity than to have Ricky Starks debut right then and there. It would immediately make him feel like a big deal. And if he comes in as a babyface or a heel, I think he could do both incredibly well. But one of the biggest things, too, that people need to understand is that nobody really understands the contract situation with Ricky. Nobody knows if he actually wants to be in WWE or not. That's the thing. There's been a lot of talk about Ricky Starks coming to WWE. There's been a lot of talks about him getting out of AEW, but nobody really knows. There's been so much talk about, okay, is he signed? Is he not signed? I don't know if he's signed. But it does sound more likely that Ricky Starks would go to NXT versus the main roster. It would make a lot more sense for Ricky Starks to go and get immediately elevated to the world title picture, because that's one of the biggest weaknesses of NXT so far. The NXT mid-card is stacked, the NXT tag team division is stacked, the NXT women's division and the mid-card women's division, like, it's all stacked, but the one area where they're actually kind of struggling, and maybe not even struggling, it's just maybe a missed opportunity, is having somebody that belongs at the top for the world title. And if you're the WWE and Ricky Starks is in fact a free agent and he is in fact signed to WWE NXT, you bring him there, you have him hold it down with Trick Williams for the next 6-7 months, and then Ricky Starks would then get called up to the main roster. And, you know, Shawn Michaels has been very adamant. This is a new look for NXT. NXT is getting a makeover. NXT is going to look different. NXT is going to have a different physical appearance than what they've had before. The NXT brand is being reshaped. So if you want to show people it's a new era, tonight is the night you do it. It's a new TV network, which means new television partners, which means you got to appease new different executives. You got to start making these people happy because they're not the same people from USA Network, right? So the way to do that is by having a all hands on deck type of show. And the way that you do an all hands on deck type of show is by immediately having the big time debuts. I think Ricky Starks does appear in NXT. I 1000% believe it happens. I don't know if it happens tonight, but I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked if it did. And I think that's a really good thing. Like, I think that's a really good thing for WWE to have, where these debuts aren't necessarily getting spoiled, because nobody anticipated Ethan Page. Nobody knew that Ethan Page was let out of his contract. And listen, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this respectfully, but AEW is a very, very, very interesting company because we thought they were going to be the alternative. They're clearly not the alternative. Tony Khan talks often about WWE's pettiness, and then we see that Tony Khan just added injury time to Rey Fenix. Now you have to wonder, is it a possibility in the slightest that Tony Khan may have added injury time to Ricky Starks as well? Some people are under the belief that Tony Khan's going to do it to, they think he's going to do it to Miro. They think he's going to do it to Malachi Black from preventing people going to NXT. But just keep in mind, WWE did not do this to Bobby Lashley, and we all know Bobby Lashley is going to AEW. So it's a very, very, very interesting situation here. I do think, going back to Jafar's tip, right? Like that question that he asked, like with surprises, yeah, I expect them at this point. I fully expect, but I don't think it's just going to be Julia, Stephanie Vicker, and Delta Brady. I just don't think that's the case. Some people in the chat are asking, what about Miro? Anthony Oderwald says Miro versus Obafemi. Look, maybe that's a possibility. Maybe Miro goes back to NXT. I don't know. I just feel like Miro would be better off on the main roster. But my point that I'm making is that there is definitely some surprises planned for NXT. Ricky Starks showing up in NXT would be absolutely massive. And if I was Tony Khan and Ricky Starks didn't want to be there, and I say this all the time, guys, look, if people don't want to be there, don't let them be there. Don't hold them captive. Do not. I don't know how many times I got to say this, but if I was running AEW and I have people that do not want to be in my company, why would I keep them in my company? Let them go to the competitor. Let them go to the competitor. You're not doing anything with them. You're not putting them on TV. There is plenty of talent in AEW who are not being utilized right now. So I understand the speculation for sure. Also, one other thing that you got to keep in mind is there is that partnership with TNA. Can we see somebody from TNA show up tonight? I think that is a very big possibility as well. So that is something to look forward to as well. But yeah, Ricky Starks and NXT is an interesting question. I see you guys all popping off on the chat about it. I think it is very, very possible, but there's just too much confusion surrounding his contract, and maybe Tony Khan has let him out. Well, who knows? Who knows? But I'm definitely intrigued to see what happens there.